Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. We're on the phone with retired Major General John Singlaub. General Singlaub has had an illustrious military career, beginning with service in the OSS during World War II, where he parachuted and engaged in covert operations behind Nazi lines. He rose through the U.S. Army to the rank of Major General. In 1977, he was relieved of duty as commander of all U.S. forces in South Korea after criticizing Jimmy Carter's decision to withdraw troops from the Korean Peninsula. General, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, the Senate is reviewing behind closed doors the START Treaty, the new strategic arms reduction treaty between the U.S. and Russia. President Obama and the Democrats are trying to push it through the lame duck session, while Republicans are trying to put it on hold. Do you think that the Senate should ratify the accord as is?
No, I do not. I think it's so unusual to try to have such an important item of national defense decided by people who've already been voted out of office. I think the lame duck session is a good thing to make sure that the government doesn't stop functioning by our voting appropriations. But a thing as important as the new START treaty, I think, is something that deserves to be debated in the Congress publicly.
Exactly why don't you approve the treaty?
Well, the treaty requires us to limit ourselves out of voluntarily doing it. The Soviets have found themselves in desperate need and can't keep up. And by our reducing our armaments and not modernizing them, as is the normal thing, to keep the deterrent value of our strategic strike force, we're weakening ourselves without any compensating concession from the Soviet Union.
Now, Republican Senator John Kyle says that the U.S. got snookered in negotiations. Opponents of START are also concerned about giving Russia a nuclear advantage over the U.S. with tactical nuclear weapons, an issue not covered in the treaty. What do you say to that?
Well, I agree with John Kyle. I think that I don't know how we got into this, but it sneaked up, and now they're trying to sneak it through the approval process by a lame duck Senate. And there are a lot of people on that Senate that are going to vote on this that have nothing to lose. They've already lost their standing in their community. They can vote in the way that their party tells them to, and that's a bad thing.
Let's talk about the situation now between North Korea and South Korea. South Korea held new live-fire exercises on Monday. In the end, the North said that it would not react despite an earlier threat to retaliate. In your view, just how dangerous is this situation in the Korean Peninsula right now?
Well, I think it's dangerous because we have an irrational leader in charge of North Korea who is trying to generate international publicity that will benefit his son. I mean, you know, they're setting an unusual precedent by establishing a Korean communist dynasty, which is contrary to even to the beliefs of most communists. But the armed forces of North Korea are larger than those of South Korea, and in that respect, since they have no regard for human life in the North, they pose a threat when they are commanded by an irrational leader. But the facts are that the South Korean armed forces, while smaller, are more modern, and most importantly, they've been able to train with their weapons and their vehicles of various types, whether they're aircraft or ships or boats or tanks. The North is very short on fuel and wouldn't have any to train with if it hadn't been for the largesse of South Korea in those years prior to the takeover of the current president.
Now, the UN Security Council held an emergency meeting on the Korean Peninsula crisis. China and Russia pushed back on condemnation of the North for last month's attack. Just how damaging have Russia and China been to international efforts to rein in North Korea?
Well, they've done very little. And that's why they've threatened to veto any such resolution from the Security Council of the UN. Is because they are the principal supporters and providers for North Korea, and North Korea knows that they've got these two giants that will, in an emergency, provide help to them, and they want to take advantage of that.
Former Governor Bill Richardson, in an unofficial capacity, is attempting to ease tensions in the region. He says the North is ready to make concessions, but is a South Korean official right to feel that North Korea is simply trying to fool the international community?
Well, I don't see how there is nothing in the history of the relations between those two countries, North and South Korea, that suggests that the North will ever fulfill their side of a negotiated settlement.
South Korea is threatening to retaliate, perhaps massively, if North Korea makes another hostile, violent act against it. Besides last month's attack, the North Koreans sank a South Korean vessel earlier this year, killing scores of South Koreans. Let's suppose South Korea does retaliate massively. Do you see a full-blown war growing out of that retaliation?
I think that it might take place. I think it would be very unwise for the North Koreans to do this, because we have a treaty with South Korea that we would give them aid, and we could do this in many ways, including not even sending more troops out there, but sending some well-directed, highly explosive weapons. Within the Korean community, they are fed up with the constant giving away of things to North Korea without getting anything back, and they have put the pressure on the president. So if he does it, it should be fast and clear, and not a major war. I think that takes a lot of skill.
North Korea clearly has nuclear devices. Do you see a war with North Korea going nuclear?
I don't think that they would have the time to retaliate if we used nukes against them, which we are likely to threaten to do. And certainly, if they thought they could launch a surprise attack, they would be more likely to do that. I don't think that they can get away with a surprise attack. Therefore, I doubt that they will use it unless it's a desperate thing to save the face of the youngest general, four-star general in the world, the new guy that's going to be the commander of North Korea.
Looking back, General, you resigned over Korean policy. President Truman fired General Douglas MacArthur over differences about Korea and collaterally China. Do you think history is going to prove General MacArthur right, that we should have liberated the whole peninsula of Korea and not allowed a communist regime to nest there?
Well, I think that it has already proven that. The fact that we are having these troubles today would not have taken place when we had that position before. I think MacArthur did wrong, and Truman was correct in firing him, because he went over the head of the president. His deals should have been made with the president, not try to go around the president by talking directly to members of Congress. That's not in keeping with our method of operating and with the law of this country. And so, well, I think it would have been better if we had settled the unification then. We didn't, and now it's more difficult, except if we had a vote, a real vote in North Korea, they would vote to come join the South.
General, last question for you is on a different issue. This weekend, the Senate voted to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It is now heading to President Obama's desk for his signature. Is a repeal the right move for the U.S. military, in your view?
In my view, and the view of every combat officer that I know, it is a terrible mistake to change the law. And this is not simply a policy of don't ask, don't tell. It was an effort by Clinton to get around the law, which says that homosexuals are not eligible for service in the military. And that should be the law. It should be enforced. And I just can't believe that we would allow such a thing to happen.
All right, General John Singlaub, thank you so much for your time today and for your insight and, of course, for your service to our country. And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.